All right. Cool. All right. Let's get into it. So today's going to be a review of what we did on Friday, probably what you worked on over the weekend a little bit. And we're just going to go through kind of building out um, this bad boy, Pokemon teams. And what we're going to do is we're going to just go through a process of kind of like what we did on Friday. But it's kind of putting it all together, kind of reinforcing what we've been going through and like making sure we clear up any things that anyone was struggling with. And it'll be an opportunity for anyone to be like, hey, this is how I did it. I'm not really sure. The approach that we chose to do for this review is like very explicit and a lot of um, like step by step each thing. Here's how you add it to the DOM, and here's how you add each piece of information. And then we're going to walk through it. There's different ways to do it. There's also a solutions branch. If you check that out, that's done in a different way. So you'll see two ways to do it. The way that I'm doing it is without any like string literal, like template literal stuff with like the backticks and adding in variables. And I'm not doing something else called event delegation because we haven't really talked too much about it, but we will later. So basically, I'm going to be doing the same way that we did on Friday with a couple additional things. Cool? All right. So let's get started. So if we look at the README, there we go. I don't know if you guys know this, but if you Shift Command P and then type in read Markdown, you can toggle the preview if that's ever helpful. So let's check out what we're building. So we're supposed to be building something like this, where we have Pokemon teams. We've got a bunch of trainers. You can add Pokemon, and you can release them back into the wild. And each Pokemon have nicknames, and there's like an Ivysaur, a Farfetch'd, all that stuff. Cool. So if we check it out and we look at the requirements, we have like basically three things. So when a user loads the page, they should see all of the trainers with their current team of Pokemon. And whenever a user hits add Pokemon, they should have, and they have space on their team, they should get a new Pokemon. And whenever a user hits release Pokemon on a specific Pokemon team, that specific Pokemon should be released from the team. There's kind of a GIF showing adding Pokemon, releasing them. So this kind of behavior. Cool. Did this part trip anyone up at the beginning? No. All right. So there's some great helper HTML. So the README says a Pokemon card can be placed within the main tags. So for like, oh, what's that? We check it out here. It's even got this nice little comment. It says add a Pokemon right here. Cool. Still following. And if we keep going, we have, got it. This is what a trainer card should look like. So we've got kind of a container, and it's got, looks like the trainer's name. It's got trainer's ID, and adding add a Pokemon like text inside of this button, then a UL with a bunch of Pokemon in it. And it looks like there's a button there as well to release a specific Pokemon with a Pokemon's ID on each of these things. And then we also have an API that's provided. So we're going to be using like a Rails backend, kind of like what we did on Friday. And here's the steps to set it up. And then an example of the requests. And so this one's for getting all the trainers and their Pokemon. There's another one for adding Pokemon. And there's another one for releasing Pokemon. So without going through this lab, the first time this actually tripped me up, I was like, where do you actually add Pokemon? Well, it's in the README, but it's hard to see initially if you don't check out the README fully. You're like, okay, this is actually how it works. Did anyone have trouble with like the adding of a Pokemon or any of like the API part? Is there any confusion on that? Like getting set up, or like Was there any confusion on just like kind of going through what was required? All right, everyone's rock stars. Cool. All right, so from there, let's just get started. So where did everyone start? Where do you think we should start? Loading all the trainers? Cool. Why do you think that? Yeah, I like that strategy. That's cool. Did anyone else do anything different or start anywhere differently? Okay. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, that's another valid way to do it. Totally. What were you gonna say? Okay, cool. Awesome. All right. So yeah, so we've got two different strategies. One is kind of like tackling the HTML and like you're saying, hey, we know this template. Cool. I can start to build out stuff that creates that. Totally valid. And you're saying, hey, well, we know we have this API and we have data and we can start there. Not necessarily the right answer as long as you have like a thought process on like how to tackle these things out. I'm going to go with actually Gesundheit, more of the API, starting with that. So the first thing we need to do, if we want to do that, is like, for me, I just like want to play with the API and see like what we have and how we can start to mess with it. So we can CD into our backend. So I'm actually already there here. And then I can bundle install. Cool. And then Rails DB migrate. Then run our seeds. We've already done that. And then just Rails S. Get our server up and running. Yep. A little bigger? Yeah, no problem. Cool. So just to see if this is working, we can go to localhost 3000. Cool. We have, yay, you're on Rails. And if we look at the README, there's get trainers. So we should be able to go to /trainers and see all the information. Gesundheit. And it looks like we're up and running. We've got the trainer's ID, the name of the trainer. Then it looks like an array of Pokemon objects. And yeah, looks like we have each of the trainers and their Pokemon. Cool. And if anyone got tripped up in any of these spots, just like stop and be like, hey, well, how like this was something that was really confusing. I'm not sure. And we can just like go through it. It's the time for that. So it looks like we're set up. Awesome. Cool. I think that's enough to start playing around. So you started by saying like, cool, we have this like API and we start to get information from it. How did you start with that? Like, what was your next steps after getting this set up? Yeah, cool. Oops. So if I go to index, yeah. So this is kind of what we were given, right? So yeah. I guess, yeah, so you're saying like fetching the URL. I think one of the things I'm gonna do is just kind of walk through like my thought process on how to tackle this. So one is like template, one is like fetching the URL. So for me, it's like, first we can get data from our API. Then we can, like what you were saying, create HTML elements. Is this large enough for everyone? Yeah. All right, cool. Then we can create event listeners for, like for interactivity. And then we, another thing we need to do is kind of find the DOM element we want to attach our code to, our new HTML to. And then finally, like, I don't know, like hook everything together. Something like that. Where like this is kind of the process that I follow and I followed in this solving this problem. It's like, what are the steps that we need to do? Well, we need to get data from our API. We need to kind of create these HTML templates, or like this HTML. We need to create the interactivity. That's with event listeners. Then we need to be like, hey, where is all this going to live on the web page? And then now that we know all those pieces, it's kind of like connecting the dots. Cool. All right. So, yeah, let's start with look back this trainers, getting all trainers and their Pokemon. So all we need to do is make a simple get request to trainers, and we should be able to get our information back. So does anyone like did anyone have, or like was anyone able to do that and feel confident about kind of like walking through this? Yeah, go ahead.
So you're going to fetch from the URL localhost 2000 /trainers.
Sweet. So I'm just going to use this constant. Sweet.
And then literally .then.
And then, yeah.
I would do each trainer, like I do arrow functions.
Okay.
Trainer, arrow, or no, this is response. So this, yeah, I would use response there. And then turning the response into JSON, so response.json. Parentheses. .then. Trainer, arrow, trainer at, I don't know, I haven't looked into it.
No worries.
I would have to play to know the rest.
Cool. What do you say?
I'll just call it.
Yeah, love it. Awesome. So let's cool. So if I save this and I just check the page, we should have it right away. If it's all hooked up. Let's see. Cool.
I would wrap it in a function and call it a function somewhere.
What do you mean?
I don't know. That's the answer.
Cool. All right. Yeah. So okay, so what's happening is like the best way to show this. So I'll just break this into new lines for a second. So there is some, I don't know how you wrote your arrow function. If you wrote it, for example, say like so. Now it looks like it's working. Yeah, exactly. And if I write it like so, now it's undefined. Let me zoom that in. So yeah, there's a little bit of like, kind of like syntactic helping magic that's going on. So when you use arrow functions, we'll get more into arrow functions later as well. But when you use arrow functions, you write them like this. This is a way to show like, hey, it's implicitly just like saying, hey, return. But if you write them with your like normal function definitions, like on the top, like the squiggly brackets, you have to explicitly call return. So that's what's going on. So cool. We can write it like that. That's fine. Response.json. And you're saying, this is how a promise works, right? Like if I returned, just to recap, if I just like return hi, zoom tight, and I refresh, it's just gonna, like, the input to the next then is gonna be whatever I returned. So cool. Let's go back. Awesome. And we'll just move that. So this implicitly will return this response so that we can catch it here in the next then as the first argument. Okay, so great. Let's see. Cool. Looks like we've got all of our data. It's all set up. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to follow kind of a pattern that takes this information and lets me use it in like wrapped functions. So I'm going to call this, and it'll make sense as I start to use it. So right now, what this does is this gives us the ability to say, cool, we called a URL, and then we turn it into JSON. Or I'm sorry, then we turn it, we say response.json so that it turns into JavaScript, like an array of JavaScript objects. And right now we're just console logging them. But I want to do this step later. I want to use this ability to call .then and like be able to use this, and this is not actually one trainer, but this is multiple trainers. So I want to be able to use this function later. So I'm just going to refactor this a little bit. So I'm going to call function, should I call this, get trainers. All right. And so basically what I want to be able to do is I want to be able to call trainers like this. And then whenever I call trainers, get back the trainers that I want and be able to use them. Like this is basically how I want this to work.
Why are you doing that? Is it like a specific reason?
Yeah, so if I need this, so this is kind of a pattern that is used to access APIs. For the future, you'll see things like this where basically, cool, here's like a specific, like a definition of behind the scenes how you get this information from the API and how you take it from the API and turn it into JavaScript. And that's kind of abstracted away from you. You can say, cool, I need to get trainers from the API. And then once I get this information back, then I want to go do some stuff with these trainers, maybe add them to the DOM, maybe do some other things. But this just gives you a nice, convenient way. So you don't have to write fetch over and over in different spots. And like I like to do all my API definitions just like wrapped in a simple way like that. Cool. Do you think this will work as is right here? You do, yes. So let's run it like this and see what happens. Yeah, so we're getting this weird uncaught type error, cannot read property then of undefined. And you can click on it and be like, oh, it's right here, line 11, okay. Like, oh, it says it right in context. Uncaught error, like type error, cannot read property then of undefined. So like you were saying, if I call get trainers, right? Like it returns nothing. And that's because we didn't return anything from this function. So we need to return what this outputs so that we can continue to call things like then on it, but in this function. What does this return? Exactly, a promise. So if I refresh now, we get the same information. And if I just call get trainers, like you said, it returns a promise. So that's kind of like the interface of how we're like using this. And I'm going to build out the other two functions as well that interface with our API in the same way. Any questions on that? Go ahead.
So to clarify, if you didn't return in the using the arrow function, so let's say you didn't return the response.json, right? Would it still return the promise, or would it just break?
Let's see. So you're saying if I did something like this where I don't know, I just don't return anything.
Yeah.
Like this? Cool. Still returns a promise, but you saw a console log trainers. It doesn't break because we're still returning a promise, but we're not passing anything into here. So it just is going to be undefined. Great question. Cool. All right. So we've got the first part set up. We've kind of tested that. Let's do the other two endpoints. There's not a lot of them, and let's just do something similar. So, cool. So if we go back to our README, so this one's done. We have add a Pokemon. How many people got this part working? Okay. All right. Does anyone want to take me through just the fetch that they wrote to do this? Yeah. You mean is the Rails app on? No, I just want you to the fetch. Yeah, just for now. Yeah. Perfect. Awesome. All good. Cool. Cool. And what? Anything else? Cool. All right. And since we've explicitly kind of like put it here as a response, I'm just gonna use the same thing. All right. And you said you had that in a function. Okay. Oh, got it. Awesome. Cool. So yeah, this looks great. What I'm going to do is take just this part and put it into its own function. So this function I'm going to call create Pokemon. And then from there, I'm going to like like it looks like we're missing something here. What goes in the body? Cool. Yeah. And if we're like, what is that? How do you get it? We can look at this adding a Pokemon, and you can see required body right here. It shows you it's an object with like one key, like trainer ID, with like one, for example. Cool. So we probably have to pass that in as an argument to this function that we're going to set up right now. So we're going to comment this out for right now. Awesome. All right. Cool. How do we test this? Yeah, let's put in another then here for now. And what's the response back that we get from this? Yeah. All right. Let's try it. Yeah, let's check it out. So we need a trainer ID, right? So I'm just going to go into the database. We have Gary. He's a trainer. Let's just call this method. With Gary's ID. Oh, we got an error. Gary's ID is full. Gary's party is full. He's got too many Pokemon. Let's do someone with less Pokemon. I think I've just been going nuts adding Pokemon to everybody. Matt, does he have 5? I think he has 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's see. I've got, there we go, Dick. He doesn't have as many. All right. Cool. So 10. So console logs back. Looks like a Pokemon. Cool. So it looks like it's working. And if we're like, oh, that's weird. I thought it was a trainer. Well, we can check our um, README and say, cool. We should expect to get back actually a Pokemon. That's what is happening. So if we basically add a Pokemon, all we do is make a post to Pokemons with a trainer ID and get back a Pokemon object. And this is how we know which Pokemon is getting added. This is just the way that the API is designed. Does this make sense? Or is there any confusion on this part? Yeah. So when we make a post, so this is basically someone just designed this API to behave in this way. So it's like, I don't know how to add Pokemon. And they're like, cool, well, here's a way to do it. And they wrote like nice little example of what you could expect when you go to post/Pokemons. And if you give it this header and this type of body, then you should expect to get back a specific Pokemon. So this is kind of the contract for this API. This is how it's just designed. So for like before you're like if you're like, okay, cool, where the heck do I get the data about what Pokemon I'm adding? It's right here. It's in the response of this adding Pokemon endpoint. Go ahead.
So we're adding from the Pokemon that they already have?
No, this creates a new Pokemon and adds it. So if you had like 4 Pokemon and you say post to Pokemons, my trainer, like Dick, here's a new Pokemon that's getting added. It's like random.
So we will be creating a form for that?
There's no form. There's just that button. So if you look, if you look here, it's like this. You add a button, random Pokemon gets added.
So it just gives them a random Pokemon
Yes.
from that object?
From the response.
From the Pokemon.
Yep.
Okay, that's where I was
Yeah,
like,
it's a little funky. Yep.
like in the books, and we were like, it's okay.
Yeah, if you look at the Rails app that's there, it has this like faker stuff in it. It just says like, hey, here's like some random Pokemon, random name and stuff. So that's just how this API works. Yep.
So I have a question. Since you created the function, oh no, never mind. I just answered my question.
Cool. All good.
Can you go through the body on your code?
Yeah, no problem. Oh, that's great. So let's check it out. Which part? Right here?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, great. So what's happening is we were like when I just called this, I called it with 10. First I called it with 11 and it was like, got too many Pokemon on trainer 11, man. You use train like a different trainer. So we used trainer 10. Dick only had 2 Pokemon. Then we go through this stuff and then we say basically, cool. According to the README, we need to pass in an object that says like trainer ID with some ID. And all we're doing is stringifying that so that we can pass it to our server. Because our server just takes strings back and forth. Gives us strings and we send it strings. We can't send it an object. Make sense?
Yeah.
Up here, yeah, exactly. This and this are the same, and this is just the key that we need to give it. Awesome. Well, I want to use create Pokemon the same way as we're doing get trainers. So what I want to do is remove this then, and I actually want to return this promise so that when I call create Pokemon, I can do the same type of behavior where it's like create Pokemon dot then, and actually I don't want this JSON. I want to keep that response.json. I want it already parsed. I want it already be like, I just want objects that I can mess with. Like I just want, and it's actually a Pokemon. So I just want to get my Pokemon back. So I say, I want to call like create Pokemon. And once I go to that API and I need to pass in this like 10, like that trainer ID, or 11, oops, it's too many ones. Once this comes back, it should give me back in my response with this promise. Then I have a Pokemon and I can do stuff with it. That's basically the interface that we're building. Does that make sense? Go ahead.
I guess what I'm trying to see is how would create Pokemon of 11? Would it be through the event?
We don't yet. We're just manually telling it. We're just getting, yeah, all I'm doing is like looking in our database, but soon we'll be able to. Right now, we're just building each of the API endpoints. So there's one more to build. Yep. Yeah, great question. Yeah, right now we're just testing to make sure these work, and then we don't have to worry about them anymore. So I'll just kind of put these next to each other. This is like how we use them. So last one is releasing a Pokemon. There, this might be easier to read like this. So releasing a Pokemon. Did anyone get to this one? Go ahead. Yeah, let's do that. And does it, so basically let's walk through what this says. It says, cool, here's an example. If we give it a delete as the HTTP verb and this path of like Pokemons / the ID, it should give us this back, but it should just delete it from our database, like remove the association of this, like this part. Right here. So this is the release, and it removes it from the list of Pokemon that Prince has. Cool. All right.
That's pretty simple. It's just fetch at Pokemon URL / Pokemon ID. I don't know how you're gonna interpolate that, but one way or another.
Okay, cool. So yeah, I'm just gonna work ahead a little bit and just make this function. Yeah, function, and this will be delete Pokemon, and this takes Pokemon ID, right? Yeah, and I'll just do, you're saying like you need basically this URL over here, like Pokemon / Pokemon ID. This is what we're fetching to. And remember, Pokemon's URL is just localhost 3000 / Pokemons. That's what we're putting in here. Yeah. So I'm gonna just do it like this. Pokemon ID. And there we go.
And the second argument for the fetch of the object with the method, with the key method and the value delete.
Cool. All right. Yeah, we'll just leave it like this for now. So we've got our endpoint set up. We can test this one by basically going back here. And if I refresh, we'll just keep using Dick. So we've got 3 Pokemon that Dick has, right? And each of them have an ID. So if we wanted to like remove one of Dick's Pokemon, which one do we want to get rid of? Graveler, Ditto, or Paris? All right. So ID 105. Basically, what this thing is saying is if we go to Pokemons with 105 with a delete, it should be removed from that list. So let's try it in console. Let's just see what happened for now. Yeah, so it's not there anymore.
What is the response that it gives? Does it give the object or does it give like a status of saying
Right now we didn't return anything, but it looks like according to this, we should get the object back. Yeah, so we can use it if we want to. So let's just do the same thing in case we want to do something with it. Let's parse the info, response.json, and then return the promise so that if we want to, we can do basically the same as like create. We can call delete Pokemon with like some Pokemon ID, which we don't know how to get yet, which we'll figure that out, say 140, and then we get a response back that we can use. Cool? All right, so we have basically, I know this part's a little wonky, it'll make sense as we start to go through it, but this is how we have like get trainers, we have create Pokemon, we have delete Pokemon. Any questions on this part?
did you want to save like the array of trainers into an array?
Not at this point, not yet. Yeah. Cool. All right, so let's go back and think about what we have. So we have basically an endpoint that, like, we have all our endpoints here from our API. We have got all that figured out. And now we just basically need to look at our HTML, and maybe we can start making some like HTML elements programmatically. So we have this Pokemon trainer card. And just like to review kind of the process, we want to get data from our API, check, create HTML elements. So we're on to that one. Once we have that, interactivity, and then put it on, like, find our element we want to attach everything to and hook it all up. So let's start creating HTML elements. So there's different ways to do this. Like I said, one way is to use templates and like the backtick strings, kind of like, I don't know, kind of like how we did backticks here and added this $, like string interpolation. I'm not going to do it that way. The solution branch has it that way though, if you want to see how that works. So instead, we're just going to, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take this exact thing and I'm going to paste it and comment it out. And I'm going to get rid of all this stuff. And I'm basically just going to start to make a method, or a function, I mean, that creates this stuff for us. So the way I did it is I made a function called create trainer card. And create trainer card, I'm just going to pass in a trainer object, which we'll see how that works in a second. I'll just like do it really quick. So I'm going to call that trainer data. So what I'm passing in is stuff we get back from our get trainers. I'll be passing in a trainer, like a specific trainer. So for now, before we worry about any of that data, I just want to basically get this structure set up. So looks like we have a div. It has a class and it's got this data ID. It's got a paragraph. Let's move that down here. We've got a p tag, a button, and an unordered list. Inside of there, we've got all the Pokemon. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of recreate the same structure and just like build it out with like document, create element, example, start with a div, and I'm going to call this just the container. So that's this one. And I'm just kind of going to walk through and add stuff to it. So we have a class of a card. And we have this data ID thing. So just first, before I go any further, let's just see what's going on in here. So if I console log trainer div container, let's just see what that looks like. So how would I sorry about that. How would I call this in here? We have the function set up. How would we like call this in console? Yeah, just call it. Totally. Cool. So far we console logged that we have a div with a class card. So we're just going to keep building it out like that. So this works. We're just going to keep going over and over. So so we added the class. Did anyone get to how to add this like data ID? Go ahead. Awesome. So dataset.id like that equals, yeah. So we're like, you're like, I don't know. So let's just, I'm going to make some assumptions right now, but basically we're going to pass in this object. And if we look like what's going on, it's basically, this is one object. So it's like ID is the trainer, name is Prince, and then all the Pokemons Prince has. And we have the endpoint to do that already in here, which is like trainers. So we can like look at one and kind of add in the data. So one of the keys is ID. Cool. Make sense? Awesome. So we can keep going. You know what? I think what will be helpful is actually kind of hooking this up really quick to see what this looks like. So we have just a little bit of info, but I think it'd be helpful to kind of like use this get trainers and just start to add trainers programmatically. So anyone want to walk us through how you would connect this endpoint to kind of calling that function? Yeah, exactly. So we say like get the trainers. Here's our data. Once we have it, so just to remember what this does, if I go back, see this get trainers gives us a list. It's an array of all of the trainers. That's what this does. And so we can say for each. Okay. Yeah, so for each trainer, yeah, create trainer card. So for every single trainer we have in our database, let's create a trainer card and pass in that trainer data. Cool. So let's see what that looks like. So right now, if we look back at what trainer card has, it's got a console log in it. So we can see kind of what's going on. Let's also this is also console log the trainer data as well. So we can see like this is what's coming in to this function, And so far, this is what we've made. So if we refresh, there we go. We've got, cool, this is what's coming into that function. This is the data that we passed in. And this is, so far we've got a div with a class card and data ID 9, which is the same as this ID. Any questions on that so far? I know I'm going like super slow and explicit, but I just want to make sure all the steps kind of make sense to everyone. Okay, so since we have that set up, now we can start to add more info in, basically. So we also have a name. So let's add that in. Gesundheit. So that's a p tag. And we basically just want to get the inner text and set it to whatever this object's name is. So that would be trainer data, and go back here, there's a key called name. So we want name. Cool. Yes. Yeah. So this is like just important to know. This is like this is going to be slower and more explicit. I like templating a little bit better. There's not a right answer. There's advantages and disadvantages that you can do. Right now, what I want to show is like these are all of the steps that are required to kind of like explicitly make this element. So I know it's like long-winded and like cool. Then you make this tag and you make this tag and you attach them together. But the template is kind of nice in a way to show like here's like this chunk of code and this like whole like I could have just taken this, turned it into a template, and like turned each of these things into variables. That totally is great. There's also disadvantages or advantages on like how you attach event listeners as well, because it's a string, so you can't attach an event listener right away. There's other ways to handle it, which we'll get into later, which is like something like event delegation, which is actually how it's solved in the solution branch. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, so there's two ways to do that. One is, yeah, one is like, yeah, let's just put a debugger in here. So I have a debugger right here, right under class list. So if I just look at what class list is, it's a special thing where you can like add classes. And then you have two classes now, right? So it's something that you can do there. Yeah. As opposed to class name, is that what you're saying? That's a string. And so you have to do special things to like add or remove different classes. This is just a nice, for me, it's a nice, easy API that they've given you where you can call name and like just pass in a new class. Yep. All right. So we have that. Now, let's go through and add the button. So, no. Cool. And what does a button have in it? Awesome. Yeah, we've got data set and we've got inner text. So we basically need those two things. So I'm gonna just add Pokemon button dot inner text. And this one is the same always, so I'm just gonna copy this. It's not in context with a specific Pokemon. And then add Pokemon button. We're gonna use the same thing, data set. And instead of ID, it's trainer ID. And to actually get it to look like this, you actually just camel case it, so like that. And where do we get the trainer ID from? Yeah, it's actually the same ID as this card. So trainer data.id. So before I go any further, I've got 3 elements. This one is the container for the other 2. So how would we kind of set that up so it looks like this HTML? Yeah. So let's take this container, right? It's this one here. And I'm just going to actually use append. And when you use append, you can say, cool, the first one is this trainer tag, trainer name. Second one is this button. Cool. Now we're going to console log it and see what this HTML looks like. So we've got the card, the data ID, we've got prints, we've got button, and see how it translated this trainer ID that looks like this to data-trainer ID and fed it the ID that we needed. And we've got add Pokemon. And the last thing we need to do is the Pokemon list. And that is document.create element .ul. Cool. Yes?
So the dataset ID just appends data dash to whatever you name it?
Yes. So what it's for, this data set is actually to like kind of bind data or information to a specific HTML element. So it's like, for example, before when we were keeping track of the IDs and we were using like like the actual ID tag, sort of like a class, is like the ID attribute. This is actually how it's like a way in HTML to save and like bind information to an HTML element. So you can use data for anything. I can put dataset dot whatever, and it just like will save that information to that HTML element. So we can look it up later, which we're gonna do. Yeah. Yes. Correct. It's just for like, yeah. I don't actually know if you can throw an array in there. I don't remember. I don't think you can. Pretty sure you can. I think it's just like simple like string or number or something along those lines. Yep. Cool. All right. So we have that, and we have our Pokemon list where we're gonna keep all of our Pokemon, and that is the, the final thing that's like directly appended. We got the P tag, the button, and the UL. Then we have all these Pokemon that we need to add in. Cool. So we need to kind of build a Pokemon list item now. So I'll build it in here and then I'm gonna like refactor it in a second. So let's, how, did anyone do this? Kind of this way? Anyone who hasn't spoken yet? Any thoughts on how to do it? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, so let's look at what you're talking about real quick. So I'm just gonna put a debugger right here. and I'm going to refresh. And so this debugger got called right above or right below this Pokemon list, and we have the ability to go in and see what the arguments are that we pass in, which is this trainer data. So you can see it's got a key called Pokemons. So if we go trainer data dot Pokemons, there's all of our Pokemon. You're saying we can do something like for each Pokemon. Yeah, so here's each of the Pokemon. Yep. So what do we, I'm just going to move this over here. So what do we want to do with each of these Pokemon? Okay. All right. Cool. This thing, right? Yeah, we can look in here and be like, okay, what is it got a Pokemon got? The Pokemon's got a nickname, a species, trainer ID, and an ID. And if we look in here, this looks like the nickname. I just know some Pokemon, so I know these are species. And then looks like the Pokemon ID gets used as well. Let's just do this part though. So we need kind of two things. We need Pokemon dot nickname and Pokemon dot species. So that should be the inner text. So let's okay. So basically we're saying then take the Pokemon UL and append this Pokemon LI. Yes. There you go. Like that. Yep. So it'll console log the whole thing. Let's see what this looks like now. And so we've got now a list of Pokemon with their nicknames. Awesome. Looks like we're missing something though. Yep, exactly. So we need to basically take this thing and make it and add it in as well. So we can say like Pokemon or release Pokemon button. And that is document.create element button. And we need on this inner text or whatever that was, inner text equals release, right? And we need that data set thing too. So release Pokemon button dot data set dot, instead of trainer ID, we need Pokemon ID. So it's Pokemon ID equals Pokemon dot ID. Oh yeah, we also need a class name. Good call. So, and then release Pokemon button dot class list dot add release. all over it. Awesome. And then we need to, so it's inside of this button. This button is inside of this li. So we need to, like he was saying, take the li, call append, and put the button inside of it. So let's see what this looks like. Boom. All right. Now we have everything we need. Make sense? Cool. So I know this looks like a lot of code, but like I'm going explicitly through like each thing that we need to do. We need to, like, in order to recreate this template, which we just did, we need to create this div and give it the right information. And then this basically we're just passing in each object and it's going to create this for us. Cool. One more thing that I want to do is actually I want to, when I create this trainer card, I want to actually just have it return that final template to us, like filled out and everything. So I'm going to say when I create this trainer card, I'm actually just going to return the final thing that we were console logging, the container. Which will make sense in a second. But right now, basically, if I call create trainer card, the output will be basically this, all filled out for us with when we pass in the right trainer data. Okay? So let's get this on the page to see what this looks like. So we started to do that here. I want to remove this code, which was like this get trainer stuff. And on the bottom of the page here, we said hook up everything together. That's when we're going to do that. But we need to tell it where we're going to append this information. It's like all these new trainer cards. Where does that go? Where do we, like, what element do we hook all this up to? Yeah, exactly. So if we look at our HTML, it even tells us here, it's like hook up the main tag. And if we go to our HTML, it's right here. There's only one main. That's it. Awesome. It's just a type of tag in HTML. It's like a semantically meaningful tag. It's like, here's the main content. So it's just yeah, exactly. It's just, this is like the main stuff, so I put it in here. Just like header is like like this is where the header goes. So this is supposed to be where the main content is. All right, so if we go in here, how do we find that element? Yeah. Yeah, I like using query selector. And I think we can call this something like app container. Yeah, something along those lines. So just it's cost. There we go, cost. Whoops. Thank you. Cool. So we have our element, and we have get trainers, and then we say go through the trainers for each of them. For each of the trainers, we're saying create a trainer card. How do we close the loop on this and hook it up to the DOM? So basically, we have this app container right here. How do we put each of these trainer cards into this app container? So I'm just going to say this is a variable so you can kind of check it out. So right now, if I console log trainer card, what is trainer card? Yeah, it's a div with all the info we just made. So if I refresh, see we've got each of the divs from our function we just wrote, all filled out. So how do we basically hook that up with the app container? Yeah, awesome. Yep. So now, let's see, it will be finally something on our page. There we go. So we have everything, but nothing works, but we have it all set up properly. And it represents all the same data that's here, right? Like Prince is the first one, and he's got Sandshrew, Taurus, Weezing, and Oddish, and Goldeen, and Kadabra, lots and lots. And yep, they're all right. Dick has 2, Ditto and Graveler. Cool, so it represents everything properly. So we've got, basically, I'm gonna remove this. So we now have create trainer card. We have, we're using get trainers. We've got our interface for API. And here we're saying find the DOM element that we want to attach to main. And then this is how we're using our API. This is like the cool part of it. You say get trainers. Then once you have them, go through each of them and create a card and put it inside of the app. No, there's not a benefit. I was just kind of showing kind of like how to look through it if you don't see anything on the page. Yep. All right. So what else is left? Go ahead. Yeah, event listeners, exactly. Perfect. So if we go back to the README, what are the kind of points of interactivity that we need? So we see requirements. When a user loads the page, they should see all the trainers. So we have that with their current team of Pokemon. So we have that. Awesome. And we have whenever a user hits add Pokemon, they have space, and they have space in their own team. They should get a new Pokemon. Do we have that? Let's just start there. Does anyone have any thoughts on how to do this? Go ahead. We're not, correct. Yeah, it has right now, it's the same template as here. So it has, this button has trainer ID, add Pokemon. Yeah.
I'm actually confused because I know we have to call it on the button, right? But there are multiple buttons, so I'm not sure.
Yeah. Without.
That first button needs to be recognized.
Yeah, each of them do, right? Yeah. All good, no worries. Yeah.
So the way I done it originally is I just gave when I created the button initially.
Yeah.
That's when I gave it the event listener.
Perfect. Yeah, we can do that. We just can modify our template and do that, no problem. Cool. So let's do that. Let's go through, and we have this trainer card, and we have this add Pokemon button. That's what we're talking about. And you're saying just like add Pokemon button dot add event listener. Click, and let's call it handle add Pokemon. We don't have this method defined yet. Or you know what, for now, a way to test is we can console, you can just pass console log like that, and it will console log the event for you. So here, so never, when you're doing an add event listener, if you the event, like the function that you pass, you never want to call it because it'll call one time and then it'll never work again. So if I call console log, I'll just show you. So if I call console log like hi, like this, see it went 8 highs automatically. Why? Because there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 buttons. So it called it 8 times. And now if I click a button, it's like, yeah, get out of here. I already did my job. I'm done. But if we have console log and we don't pass it anything, we're just saying, hey, when you click, run this function and pass it in an argument, which is the event. Now check it out. Nothing fires. If I click here, this is the event. Or if I click here, here's the next event. I can keep clicking events. Yep. Woody?
Since we're not delegating, that's why we're targeting the button instead of targeting card.
Exactly. Because we have the button available in the JavaScript like variable, we're just going to use it right away. So so this looks like it all works. So I'm going to make a new function. And what I'll do is I'll actually write it in line so it makes sense, and then I'll remove it so you can like check it out as its own function. So I'm just going to call function handle add Pokemon, which takes an event. And what do we want to do with it? We want to do a couple things. First, we want to kind of like find the trainer ID probably and like pass that info. So we have this create Pokemon, which is what we're actually doing. We're creating this Pokemon. We have a trainer ID. So we need to like basically somehow call this in here, create Pokemon. And we need to get like trainer ID somehow. And then once we have the trainer ID, it'll give us our Pokemon back, and we can put it into the list of Pokemon that exist. Making sense?
So would you like count how many systems are in there and then do it, or would you do it from the fetch?
Yeah, I'll show you different ways to do it. Yeah, awesome. So let's just do one of them. So we get, so first we need to find where the like two things. One, where is the list of Pokemon? And also, like, where is the trainer ID? Right, because kind of the way that we want to do this is we want to say like, just if I think about it, grab the trainer ID, send it to our API to get back a new Pokemon, and then add that Pokemon to this trainers HTML. So this is kind of like the process. So there's a lot of things we don't know yet. We don't know where the trainer ID is. We know we are going to send it here, right? That's this part. And then we need to add it to this trainer's HTML. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a debugger in here. And I'm going to click. So let's refresh. Oh, it doesn't like this. Comment this out for now. Bye-bye. All right. So I'm going to click, and if I click on prints, for example, all right, it's going to pause my code. Right in this event listener, we clicked it. If we look at the event, dot target, we have a trainer ID right here. So that's available right on this button. So how would I get access to this? Data set, trainer ID. Cool. So we have basically the argument that we need to pass in. So grab the trainer ID. So we have that. And then we need to take this and pass it in here. Send it to our trainer, or to our create Pokemon endpoint. And then how do we use this? So this is this one right here. Like, how do we, like, what do we do now that we do? Like, we send this data to our API. How do we use it? Go ahead. Yeah, we are. Let's yeah, let's do that in a second. Let's first let's just see like what happens if we, like, how do we get this data back? Cool. Okay. So we're saying basically we when we click on a specific like trainers add Pokemon button, we found the trainer ID, and we should be able to pass that in and get a Pokemon back that we can add to their DOM, like to their list of Pokemon. So let's just console log what this is, okay? I'm gonna remove the debugger. I'll just click on stuff and see what happens. So add Pokemon. Cool, so we got an error, like you were saying, you're like, this one's full, like what's gonna happen? We got an error. We have a 403, it says party is full. So we actually can't add one here, but at least it's telling us. That's like, this is coming from our console log right here, saying, yo, we can't add one. Like, sorry. Go ahead. This is just how the server works. Yeah, yeah, it's confusing. That's, the server came back with an error, and the server is saying there's like, you can't add more than 6 Pokemon. Yeah.
So doing the lab this weekend,
Yeah.
did allow you to add extra things if you didn't put it in some sort of conditional socket. So it wouldn't be a Pokemon, but it would be undefined or whatever.
It would be undefined, undefined, undefined every time. Yeah, exactly. So you do need to protect from it. I'm just sure. Yeah.
How did you get that by default?
It for you it came with by default as well. It so this is from the server, but you can still add elements to the DOM. Yeah, I'll show you. We'll do it. Yeah. What did you say? Yeah. Came back with a nice new Pokemon that we added. Right, that's like the difference. If there's availability, the server will give you one back. That's why you were getting undefined before. Oh, yeah, we'll walk through it. So like, yeah, we've got these right now though. It's not adding. If I refresh, they're there now, but we don't have a way to add them in HTML, like dynamically. So we have a Pokemon. How would we add a new Pokemon to our list of already existing Pokemon?
Can you refactor that object?
Yeah, let's do it. So right now, if I wanted to do that, we have this like trainer data Pokemons thing that we loop through, which takes a Pokemon and like has all the stuff we do. And what I would want to do is I actually would want to like make it its own function, and then we can use it multiple places. So what I would do here is just like we have create trainer card. I'm going to make another function called create Pokemon li. And that takes a Pokemon's data, and anywhere where we have Pokemon dot, now we can just use this create Pokemon li, and we just have to return the container, which is this thing right here, the list item. We just return the HTML, and now anytime we need to make a Pokemon in HTML, we have a function that returns the HTML for us. So we need to use it here. So now, just like how we are down here using create trainer card with trainer info, we're just doing the same thing here. We're saying create a Pokemon li, which is this helper function we refactored. And same thing we're doing, we're just appending all of them there. So let's just see what that looks like. Same thing. Ideally, if you do a refactor, nothing changes. This means like nothing breaks, it looks good. So we can use the same code, create Pokemon li, just pass in a Pokemon object, and it'll build the HTML for us, as opposed to having to write this all again. Go ahead. Yeah, no worries. So I'll just Command Z. So here's what happened. We had all this data and all this info in here. This is a really large function. Starts here. It says like, hey, create a trainer card, and this is handling writing all the HTML for this trainer and passing in all the data. But it also is handling all of this like Pokemon info too. So we're saying go through each Pokemon in this trainer card and add and like make all the HTML for that Pokemon. What I'm doing is I'm trying to like dry the code up because I want to add create Pokemon list items in multiple places. So here it's just like looping through every Pokemon in the data and creating a list item. I want to basically say, hey, I'm going to make that into a function so that I can do it here, but I can also create list items anywhere. Yeah, yeah. So now, oops. If I look back, now what I'm doing is basically saying, take this info here. So this is all of the info that creates a Pokemon list item and make it its own function. So this is called create trainer card. I'm going to call this one create Pokemon list item. And you're going to feed it in Pokemon data. Which is like the nickname, the species, and the ID. And you're going to return me the finished Pokemon list item. And I'm going to use that right where we were before. It's the same code, I'm just refactoring it to be in a function. And I'm basically going to say, cool, for every single Pokemon object in the trainer data, create a Pokemon list item, and take my UL and append each of these LIs that I make. So now I can use this. First, it's cleaner. You can see like, okay, cool. Now I have like Pokemon list items here. So it's cleaner that way. And then also I can reuse this code over and over. So if we just like go in to debugger just to see what we did. So right here, we have this function now, create Pokemon li. Right, it's this function that we just made. We've got the Pokemon data. And I'm basically calling this method, and it returns back the Pokemon list item. That's what's going on now. All right. So, almost done. So since we refactored that, we can make Pokemon list items if we just give it an object. That's what's happening, right? I have an object, which is my Pokemon info. It's got ID, nickname, species, and trainer ID. I pass it in here, and it creates this list item for us. Going back to our event handler, add Pokemon. We basically say, cool, we've got a new Pokemon. And now we can create that HTML for this Pokemon. So let's see what that does. So this is on our event handler for add Pokemon button. I'm just going to console log what we just did. So right now it's still giving us li, even though it's broken. This is where we get undefined. Just ignore that for now. But for Dick, we get back a new Pokemon as a list item. Does that make sense? But it doesn't show up here, right? So we clicked it. Asia Diglett isn't on this list. So we need to do one more thing. So add that Pokemon to the to this trainer's, like, basically UL, right? Because, like, if you look in here, we basically have a list of all the Pokemon. We just need to, like, append it into here. So the last thing I'm going to do is we need to find that UL. So I do a debugger. And I'm in this event. That's the button. That's the card. And if you look in here, there's a UL inside of this card. And there's a list of Pokemon. So basically, we have our Pokemon's list, and we just say, add our new Pokemon to the list of Pokemon that are there. So there's one left. So if I click add Pokemon, there we go. It works. Go ahead. Yeah, so I'll get that error now. Because there's 6 Pokemon, you can't have more than 6. So if I add another one, see, I get that error, and it's undefined, 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 like forever, right? The server is saying you can't add another one. So the server's trying to stop you. And since you don't have any info about, like, since there's nothing to, like, there's no info about any Pokemon, there's no Pokemon that comes back, it just comes back with undefined over and over. So the last thing I'll show you is, like, how to fix that. It's basically like, the logic is you can't have more than 6 Pokemon. So basically you can either say, hey, check the DOM and make sure that there's not more than, like, there's 6 or less to, like, append stuff, or you can check the server. So I'm going to just show it to check the DOM. So like, there's actually a method how to check the number of children in a element JavaScript. So there's something called child element count, and that will show you basically how many elements, like for example, how many LIs are inside a UL. So in there, you can say if this UL is less than or equal to 6, then create the Pokemon. Otherwise, don't do it.
Does it matter? Like, let's say you put the if statement outside of the add Pokemon.event add event listener, because you could have done it over there as well, right?
You could just, you want to put it in the event listener to check. Yeah, yeah. So if I go back now and I refresh, so it's still adding them. I think, what do you say? Ah, you're right, equal to 5. So let's try it now. Yep, there we go. So now we don't get that error anymore. So that's like one way to check this.
Also, in your function,
Yep.
when you pass an event, could you have this also passed in the trainer data object as well with the event?
Because I added it here, yes. But what I normally would want to do is to actually put this. Here's the event listener. Handle add Pokemon, and just like go back to click and put it here. It's because there's not so much code, and it's like separation of each of the things.
And if you were to pass in, let's say you had handle add Pokemon, you pass an event and trainer object, and then you pass in those two things, it will only fire once.
Yes. Yeah. Yep. Okay. So I know that was a lot, and we got to almost everything. I will finish out the code, and if anyone has any questions afterwards, feel free to ask me. Any questions so far, just to round this out? Go ahead.
When you do class list.add,
Yep.
do you add multiple classes in that same argument, or do you have to call it again like class list.add?
I'm not sure. We can. Nope. Looks like it works. Yep. You can do it multiple. Anything else? Yep.
I was just not adding Pokemon because I was following along, so I don't know what I missed.
All right. Yeah, I can debug with you after.
So with the event listener,
Yep.
you're grabbing the trainer ID,
Yep.
and then this part I'm kind of confused with, to send it to our API to get back a new Pokemon.
Yeah, that is a confusing part. That's just how the API is designed. So basically, it's not something that is normal from what we've seen so far, but it's basically saying here, it's because of this thing. So it's saying when I post to Pokemons with a trainer ID, I should expect to get back a Pokemon object. And then I add that to the DOM. Yeah. Go ahead.
Is event delegation better than what we're doing?
It will make this part potentially easier. You can look through the solution branch, and if anyone has any questions on it before our next lecture on that, you can come ask me or anyone else. But we'll go through that in more detail, like probably tomorrow or the day after or something. Yep. Go ahead.
So instead of doing the is statement, couldn't you have just caught the error?
Yes, you can do that too. Yeah, I just showed one way to do it. Yeah. Yeah, in like the response. Yeah. Cool. Any other questions? All right. Thank you.